My name is Shelley Gray. I'm 34 years old, a software engineer in Charleston. Every Sunday, I sit at the family dinner table, forcing a smile, while my bank account quietly bleeds. I've paid for my parents' mortgage, my brother's car repairs, even his dog's vet bills. It's always been this way, me footing the bill, them taking it for granted. But last Sunday, everything changed. Spencer, my brother, strolled in 20 minutes late, grinning like he owned the room. He dropped a bombshell. "I'm unemployed," he said, all casual charm, "but I need $50,000 to start a coffee shop. I promise I'll pay you back." His promises? I'd heard them before. My stomach twisted as I remembered the thousands I'd lent him, money that vanished like smoke. I glanced at Mom and Dad, expecting them to call him out. Instead, their eyes turned to me, heavy with expectation. "You'll help, right?" Mom said, her tone more command than question. I gripped my fork, my heart pounding. His promises were empty, and I was done being their ATM. "No," I said, my voice steady but sharp. The table went silent. Dad's face reddened. He snapped, "How dare you?" I shot back, "Why not?" That's when the war began. A war I didn't start, but one I was ready to finish. What happened next flipped my world upside down, and I'm still picking up the pieces. But to understand why this moment mattered so much, you need to know how it all began. When I was a kid, I learned the family rule. Spencer gets the praise, I get the work. Our house in Charleston buzzed with unspoken expectations, and I was always the one carrying them. Spencer, 2 years younger, could do no wrong. Mom and Dad showered him with shiny toys, a remote control car, a skateboard, even a guitar he never learned to play. He'd break them, lose interest, and move on. Meanwhile, I'd watch Mom hand him crisp bills for new sneakers, while I scrubbed dishes, my hands raw from chores. Their wallets were tight for me, but for Spencer, bottomless. "He needs support," they'd say, as if I didn't. I wanted books, science manuals, coding guides, anything to feed my dreams. But Mom would shrug. "You're responsible. Figure it out." So I did. I took a paper route, biking through Charleston's humid streets to earn every penny. I hid my books under the bed, afraid Spencer would ruin them like everything else. When I started tutoring classmates to save for a computer, Mom took half my earnings to buy Spencer a new jacket. She said, "He's growing so fast," ignoring my clenched fists. My grades soared, but Dad barely looked at my report cards. Spencer's C- earned him a pat on the back and a new Walkman. One Christmas still burns in my memory. Spencer got a brand new gaming console, the kind every kid begged for. He played it once, then left it on the floor. When it broke, Mom turned to me, eyes sharp. "Why didn't you share yours?" she scolded. I hadn't even touched his. My own console, bought with months of saved-up tips, was locked away in my drawer. Sharing meant losing what I worked for. I swallowed my anger, learning to hide the sting of being overlooked. Another summer, Spencer went to a fancy camp with hiking and bonfires. I stayed home, mopping floors, cooking dinners. "Spencer needs experiences," Dad said, while I ironed his shirts. I'd lie awake at night wondering why my efforts never mattered. That quiet question followed me for years. By 16, I'd taken on more to keep the family afloat. I paid the electric bill when Dad forgot. I mowed lawns, fixed leaky faucets, bought groceries when Mom said we were short. They never thanked me. It was just expected. Spencer, meanwhile, racked up debts at the arcade, and Mom would sigh, "He's just finding himself." I was the one holding the pieces together, but they never saw it. I taught myself to bury the hurt, to keep going despite their indifference. But it built a quiet resentment, growing with every chore, every dollar, and every unspoken debt. Years later, when a tech firm in Austin offered me a promotion, I kept it secret. I knew what would happen. Mom would guilt me into staying. "Spencer needs you close," she'd say. Dad would not, muttering about family duty. They'd built their world on my back and expected me to carry it forever. I was their bank, their fixer, their invisible glue. Even as a child, I'd felt the weight of that unfairness pressing down, shaping every choice I'd make in adulthood. All those lessons about being the responsible one followed me, and so did Spencer's broken promises. One quiet evening, I sat alone in my Charleston apartment, eyes locked on my bank statement. The numbers screamed at me. Each transaction a reminder of everything I had given. My account was bleeding. $200 for Spencer's car repair last month, $300 to cover Mom and Dad's electric bill, even $150 for a plumber when their pipes burst. Every swipe of my card felt like a silent agreement to keep the family afloat. But at what cost? I scrolled through the list of payments, my chest tightening. All those zeros, all those withdrawals, and not one thank you in sight. I thought back to 2 years ago, when Spencer cornered me at a coffee shop. "I need $5,000 for a trip to California," he'd said, eyes wide with fake excitement. "It's a networking thing. I'll pay you back in a month." I wired the money, believing his promise. The trip turned into bar tabs, beaches, and selfies. The repayment never came. Then came the phone. $2,000, he said. It was for a side hustle. I sent it, hoping maybe this time he'd step up. Instead, he bought a shiny new smartphone and ghosted my texts about the debt. His promises were like smoke, pretty in the moment, gone by morning. Still, I kept helping. I told myself it was for the family, to keep us together. I wanted Mom to look at me with pride, not just relief. I wanted Dad to see me as more than a checkbook. Every dollar I gave was a thread I thought tied us closer. But really, it was a chain. That afternoon, I met Diane, my closest friend, at a cafe downtown. She sipped her latte and shook her head, scrolling through her phone. "Spencer's spending is out of control," she said. "He just posted a photo in a new leather jacket, tagged at some boutique." I nodded, stirring my coffee in silence. Diane wasn't one to lecture, but her words lingered. They poked at the truth I didn't want to face. Later that night, my phone rang. "Mom, we need you to cover Shadow's pet insurance," she said, her voice clipped and matter-of-fact. "It's only a few hundred. It's family responsibility." Shadow, Spencer's dog, the same dog I'd already paid the vet bills for last year. I gripped the phone tighter. Why can't Spencer handle it? Mom sighed, as she always did when I dared to question. "He's going through a lot, Shelley. Don't make it harder." Somehow, I was always the villain for saying no. I hung up, staring at the joint account I'd opened years ago for family emergencies. It was my money, my safety net, but they treated it like theirs. Doubt crept in. Why was I still letting this happen? The thought of cutting them off felt like betrayal. What if they fell apart without me? I swallowed that fear, keeping the account open. I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. But something inside me had started to crack. 2 weeks later, it was Sunday again. The dining room glowed with candlelight, the air thick with the smell of roast and the tension of unspoken expectations. I sat across from Spencer, his grin easy, confident. Mom passed the mashed potatoes. Dad carved the roast, avoiding my eyes. Tracy, Spencer's girlfriend, chatted loudly about her new job, her voice grating on my nerves. I braced myself for another demand. And then Spencer cleared his throat. "So, I got fired," he announced, casual as if he'd misplaced a pen. "But I've got a plan. I need $50,000 to open a coffee shop. It's a sure thing. I'll pay you back." His eyes locked on mine, confident I'd cave. My fork froze midair. I remembered the trip, the phone, the unpaid promises, the smoke. I set the fork down gently. "I can't trust your promises, Spencer." My voice cut through the room like glass. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's knife clattered onto his plate, his face twisted with anger. "How dare you?" he roared. "He's trying to build something." Mom nodded sharply, her tone accusing. "You're tearing this family apart." Their voices collided, heavy and sharp, turning me into the villain at their table. Then Tracy chimed in, smirking. "You're too rigid to understand ambition," she said, her tone dripping with judgment. I stared at her, a stranger who'd walked into my family and thought she could define me. My blood boiled. "Why not?" I shot back. "I've funded Spencer's dreams long enough." That's when the shouting started. Mom's voice cracked with rage. Dad slammed his fist on the table. Spencer just shrugged, as if my refusal was nothing more than an inconvenience. I pushed my chair back, the sound slicing through their anger. "I'm done," I said, standing tall. Their shouts followed me as I grabbed my coat. I walked out, slamming the door behind me. My pulse thundered in my ears. For years, I'd been their safety net. But that night, I drew the line. They could scream all they wanted. I wasn't turning back. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. It was my Aunt Frances. Her message flashed across the screen. "Help your family. It's the only way to find peace." I stared at the words, thumb hovering over the reply. She didn't get it. None of them did. I deleted the text, tossed my phone onto the passenger seat, and drove into the night. Their voices faded behind me, but the weight of that moment clung tight, a turning point I hadn't seen coming. The next morning, I opened my banking app, and my blood ran cold. The joint family account, my safety net, showed 3 new withdrawals. $2,000 from Mom, $1,500 from Dad, $3,000 from Spencer. No texts, no calls, no permission. They'd taken my money as if it were theirs. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. Every transaction felt like a knife. I called Mom first. "Why did you take $2,000 without asking?" I demanded. She didn't miss a beat. "You're so ungrateful," she snapped. "We needed it for the house. You owe us for all we've done." Her words cut deep, twisting years of sacrifice into a debt I'd never agreed to. I called Dad next. "You're destroying this family. We count on that money." I hung up, my hands trembling. They didn't see me as a daughter, only a resource. When I called Spencer, his tone was smug. "It's our money," he said. "You just manage it." The humiliation burned through me. My savings, my late nights, my sacrifices. None of it meant anything. I hung up. My chest burned with rage and clarity. That afternoon, I drove to the bank. Every step felt like shedding a chain. I locked the debit card linked to the joint account, canceled the transfers, and closed it entirely. No more mortgage payments, no more car repairs, no more pet insurance, no more being their lifeline. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. That day marked the real beginning of my freedom.
The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications, texts, calls, missed FaceTimes, all from my family. I didn't answer a single one. By noon, the first Facebook post appeared. Mom's profile picture beamed at the top, her caption dripping with heartbreak. "It's sad when your own child forgets where she came from," she wrote. "Family means sharing, not selfishness." Hundreds of comments rolled in. Cousins, neighbors, even old family friends. Each one echoing the same judgment. "So ungrateful. Money changes people." My throat tightened as I scrolled through the feed. Every comment was a knife, twisting deeper. And then I saw Spencer's post. A picture of him holding Shadow the dog with a caption that read, "Family doesn't abandon you when times are tough." The comments poured in. Pity, sympathy, applause. He played the victim perfectly. I wanted to scream, to post the receipts, the bank statements, the truth. But I stopped myself. What was the point? They didn't want the truth. They wanted an enemy. And I was convenient. That night, Diane called. "Shelley, are you okay?" Her voice was soft, cautious. "Your mom's post is everywhere. Even Aunt Frances shared it." I let out a bitter laugh. Of course she did. She hesitated. Do you want me to say something? No, I said, studying my breath. They'll twist it no matter what you say. After I hung up, the silence in my apartment felt deafening. For the first time in years, I wasn't their safety net, and yet somehow I'd never felt more alone. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Aunt Frances herself. A long text. Shelley, blood is thicker than water. Don't burn bridges you'll regret. I stared at her words for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then slowly, I typed back. Blood doesn't give anyone the right to bleed me dry. And hit send. Over the next few days, the tension grew louder than any argument. Mom's messages turned colder. Your father's blood pressure is up because of you. Spencer might have to sell his car. How can you watch him struggle? Guilt was their weapon of choice, and I had no defense left except silence. One afternoon, while I was deep in a coding sprint, my doorbell rang. I froze. Through the peephole, Mom, standing there, clutching a folder, her face tight with fury. I hesitated, then opened the door. She brushed past me into the living room. I stood there stunned. You can't just shut us out, she continued, slamming the folder onto the table. Inside, copies of bills, notes, and a list of expenses they claimed were for me. This is what we spent raising you, she said, eyes sharp. It's time you give back. I stared at her, disbelief mixing with heartbreak. You kept receipts for raising your own daughter? Her silence said it all. I laughed, quiet, bitter, tired. You don't want family, Mom, I said softly. You want funding. Get out! She froze, her jaw tightening. Don't you dare talk to me like that, after everything we've done. I cut her off. Exactly, after everything I've done. The silence between us was thick, trembling. She turned, her face hardening. You'll regret this, she said, voice trembling with rage. And then she left. The door closed behind her, and with it, a chapter of my life slammed shut. The next morning, my workplace was buzzing, people whispering, glancing my way. I checked my phone, and there it was, a public Facebook post tagging me directly from Spencer. Some people only care about money, but karma's real. Family always comes first. Attached, a photo of me at a family picnic, smiling, arm around Mom, a weaponized memory. My stomach turned. I could almost hear their voices behind those posts, guilt-laced, manipulative, rehearsed. That evening, I deleted every social media app from my phone. I was done performing for their narrative. For weeks, the silence felt like withdrawal. I caught myself checking my phone at dinner, expecting some new crisis. But there were none, just quiet, and the sound of my own thoughts finally catching up to me. One night, I sat on my balcony, watching the Charleston skyline fade into amber dusk. The air smelled of salt and rain. I thought about the little girl I used to be, scrubbing dishes, counting coins, waiting for praise that never came. I whispered into the dark, "You don't have to earn love anymore." The words felt foreign, but freeing. A week later, Dad called. I almost didn't pick up. When I did, his tone was calm, eerily calm. "We're cutting you off," he said. "Don't bother coming to Thanksgiving." My heart twisted, then steadied. "Okay," I said. He waited for me to beg. I didn't. I hung up. That single word, okay, was my liberation. The following months were quiet. Too quiet at times. But there was peace in that stillness. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was living. I redecorated my apartment, signed up for therapy, even started painting again. My therapist, Dr. Laird, once told me something I'll never forget. Sometimes peace looks like silence from people who used to control your volume. I nodded then. Now, I understand it completely. I still have moments of doubt, those little flashes of guilt that whisper, "You abandon your family." But I remind myself, I didn't abandon them. I stopped abandoning myself. And that difference means everything.
Healing doesn't arrive like thunder. It comes in whispers, in small moments. Morning light on my coffee mug, the quiet hum of the city, the steady rhythm of breathing without guilt. The first few weeks after cutting ties felt like withdrawal. My phone, silent. My calendar, empty. For years, my life had revolved around their chaos. If Spencer needed money, I'd rush. If Mom called crying, I'd drive over. If Dad demanded, I'd obey. Now there was only space. Space that felt terrifying and free. I filled that silence with therapy. Dr. Laird's office became a sanctuary of soft lamplight and uncomfortable truths. The first time I sat on that couch, she asked, "When did you first learn your needs didn't matter?" The question hit like a punch. My eyes burned as memories surfaced. The broken toys, the unpaid debts, the guilt-laden dinners. I said, "When I was 8, Mom told me to let Spencer take my allowance because he needed it more." Dr. Laird nodded softly. "That's where it started. You were trained to believe sacrifice equals love." Her words wrapped around my heart, pulling loose knots I didn't know were still there. Week after week, we peeled back layers. I began to see how every yes had cost me a little piece of myself. How every time I said, "I'm fine," what I really meant was, "I'm exhausted but afraid to stop." Dr. Laird called it learned obligation, a generational echo passed down like family heirlooms no one wanted. "Your parents weren't monsters," she said one session. "They were repeating what they knew. But you," she leaned forward, eyes steady, "you're the first one trying to break the pattern." That line stuck with me. Breaking patterns hurts because the people who benefit from your obedience will call your healing betrayal. Slowly, I started to rebuild. Not my family, but myself. I started painting again. Messy, emotional strokes across canvas. The first painting was titled Boundaries, a storm of blues and crimson lines. I sold it to a local gallery within a week. That small sale felt like something priceless, validation. Work, too, began to feel different. I stopped volunteering for every extra shift. I said no without apologizing. At first, my coworkers blinked in surprise, but then they respected it, and slowly, so did I. Diane noticed the change before I did. She said, "You're lighter," she said one afternoon, as we walked through the park sipping iced coffee, like someone took off a coat you didn't know you were wearing. I smiled, realizing she was right. The air felt different now, less heavy. I could finally breathe without bracing for the next crisis. Still, some nights were hard. I'd lie awake wondering if I'd done the right thing. Family isn't something you can just delete. But every time doubt crept in, I'd remind myself, emphasis, loving isn't control, and boundaries aren't betrayal. One evening, while sorting old files, I found a photo. Me and Spencer as kids, sitting on the porch, popsicles melting down our hands. We were laughing, carefree, unburdened. I traced the edge of the picture, feeling a strange ache of nostalgia and grief. That little girl had loved her brother fiercely, but the man he became,
the man shaped by entitlement, that wasn't the same person anymore. I didn't hate them. That surprised me. Anger fades faster than you think, once you stop feeding it with hope. I forgave them, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Dr. Laird asked me once, "What would loving yourself look like?" I paused for a long time before answering. I said, it would look like keeping promises to myself. It would sound like no when I mean no. She smiled. "That's it," she said softly. "That's the start." And it was. Little by little, I built a life rooted in boundaries, not guilt. I adopted a rescue cat, Luna, who filled my evenings with quiet companionship. I joined a local hiking group, met people who asked about me instead of what I could do for them. I even started journaling, pages and pages of unfiltered truth. No filters, no apologies. The first line I ever wrote still echoes in my head. I am not responsible for their happiness. It became my mantra, my anchor, my freedom. Months passed. Life didn't become perfect, but it became mine. There were setbacks, moments of loneliness, even brief flickers of guilt when I saw old family photos online. But those feelings no longer ruled me. They were weather, passing through, not staying forever. On my birthday, Diane threw me a small dinner. Candles, laughter, a chocolate cake with raspberry icing. Halfway through the night, I looked around the table and realized something quietly beautiful. This was family too. Not the one I was born into, but the one I chose. Later, as everyone left, I stood by the window watching the city lights dance on the river. I thought about my parents, wherever they were that night. For the first time, I didn't wish for reconciliation. I wished them peace, because I'd found mine. Healing isn't loud. It's not fireworks or grand apologies. It's a whisper that says, "You're safe now." And I finally believed it.
It had been almost a year since I left Charleston. A full circle of seasons. In that time, I had built a new rhythm, a life that felt real, not one scripted by someone else's needs. My mornings started with sunlight spilling across my balcony. My evenings ended with the sound of Luna's soft purring by my side. Peace, I learned, isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of self. Then, one quiet Thursday, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, until instinct made me answer. "Shelley?" The voice cracked through the speaker. It was Mom. My chest tightened, not in panic, but in something calmer. Readiness. "Your father's sick," she said, her voice trembling. "He's been in the hospital for a few days. We didn't know how to reach you." I closed my eyes, listening to the soft hum of the air conditioner, the city outside my window alive and distant. For a moment, the past flickered like an old film reel. Sunday dinners, slammed doors, shouted words, then silence. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said quietly. My own voice surprised me, steady even. Not cold, but clear. She hesitated. "He wants to see you." The air thickened. That familiar pull, the guilt, the duty, tried to rise, but it no longer had roots. "I'll think about it," I replied, and I meant it. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city lights shimmered below, and I replayed the conversation in my head. Part of me still cared, of course I did. But another part, the stronger part, knew the truth. seeing them again wouldn't heal the past. Only I could do that. I didn't rush to Charleston. Instead, I sent a simple message through the hospital's online portal. I hope you recover quickly. Take care of yourself. No anger, no apology, just truth. Boundaries spoken softly can still echo loudly. A week later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Not an email, but an actual handwritten note. I recognized Dad's blocky handwriting immediately. I sat at my kitchen table, turning the envelope over in my hands. For a moment, I almost didn't open it, but something inside whispered, "You're strong enough now." The letter was short. No grand apology, no confessions, just a few uneven lines. "I didn't always understand you. I thought providing meant control. Maybe I was wrong. Take care of yourself, kid." I read it twice, tears blurring the ink. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something close. Recognition. I folded the letter and placed it in my journal, the same one that began with the line, "I am not their backup plan anymore." It felt right to keep them together. An ending beside a beginning. In the weeks that followed, I didn't hear from Mom or Spencer, but I didn't expect to. Some stories don't end with reconciliation. They end with peace. Life in Austin moved forward. Work became exciting again, filled with new projects, challenges, and people who saw me for my skills, not for what I could give. My promotion to senior engineer came quietly. No fanfare, just a moment of quiet pride. I walked home that evening under the violet Texas sky, the wind warm against my skin, and thought, this is mine. One Sunday, almost exactly a year since that final dinner, I found myself at a small cafe downtown. The aroma of roasted beans filled the air, ironic given Spencer's failed dream. I smiled softly, not out of spite, but understanding. We'd both been chasing validation. I just finally found it in myself. The barista handed me my coffee, and I took it to the window seat, watching the city hum outside. No guilt, no weight, just quiet gratitude. I pulled out my phone and opened a blank note, typing the words that had been circling my mind all morning. I didn't lose them. I found me. Later that night, as the city lights dimmed, I stood on my balcony, wind brushing through my hair, Luna weaving between my legs. I looked out at the skyline and whispered, "I'm free." The words didn't tremble. They didn't ache. They just felt true. If you've been listening to my story, if you've ever carried the weight of others until you forgot your own, hear this. Choosing yourself isn't betrayal. It's a form of love, the kind that rebuilds everything they broke. I learned that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect, empathy, and choice. And for the first time in my life, I chose me. So, if you're standing where I once was, torn between duty and peace, let go. Step into the life that waits for you beyond the guilt. It's brighter than you think. My name is Shelley Gray. I'm 34, a software engineer in Austin, a survivor of my own family's expectations, and finally, I am my own person. Thank you for listening. And if you're healing too, keep going. The peace on the other side is worth every no you've ever said. You are not their backup plan either.